Hi, everyone, and welcome to podcast number 5. I've got a really special friend of mine today that I'm going to be having a nice conversation with. Ryan Little is a director cameraman. He's originally from Vancouver. He has done everything from commercials to music videos to episodic television to feature films. He won a student Emmy. He owns his own rental company. He's just a really terrific guy. He's got a lot of great stuff to share with us today. And before we get started, I thought I would share some of his director's reel with you guys because it's so good. I couldn't pass up the opportunity to share this with you a little bit before we get into our podcast. So here is Ryan Little, guys.
For having me, PC. I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, so this will be fun. I think I was looking. I was just kind of looking up your IMDb credits this morning, and you've done so much stuff, and obviously incredibly talented. You've got a great history of shooting and directing. You've done both film and television. You're dual citizenship, and you've got a student Emmy. You've got all kinds of great accolades, and so tell, how did you get started? What was it like growing up in Canada, and what sort of were your influences and how you got in this business?
Yeah, so I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I grew up there. Right after I was born in Vancouver. I actually moved to Maui with my parents because my parents were photographers. So photography has always been a big part of my family. When I was about 5, we moved back to Vancouver, and kind of like my first introduction, obviously photography, seeing my parents do that when I was very young, being around that. But in addition to that, also my dad used to shoot a lot of home videos on 8mm. And so that was a big part of me kind of being introduced to the world of film as well. So those are kind of like my roots, that's how it started when I was quite young. And then of course I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was a kid, and boom, I'm like, I want to work in that industry. I don't even know what that job is. I don't even know who Spielberg is, but that's what I want to do. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I remember seeing Raiders when I was a kid, and it was sold out show in the home, the town that I grew up in. And I remember having to sit in the front row, and sharing a seat with a friend of mine because they oversold it. And I'm like,
Oh,
I
wow.
either sit on the sticky, gooey floor or I
Yeah.
sit kind of squeezed in. And
Yeah.
thankfully, I'm kind of a fun sized guy, so it was able to accomplish that. But do you remember what your first camera was? I'm curious what your dad was shooting at, because my dad had an 8mm camera. I had a similar background growing up
Yeah.
and getting exposed to little movie making.
What camera was it you said?
Yeah.
You said, I still actually have them. There's 2 of them, and I don't have them here. I have them at my office. I think that they're made by, gosh, is it possible that Toshiba was making 8mm film cameras back then? Do you think? I
Probably.
feel like
We
it's
had a Canon.
Toshiba. No, yeah, this would be like a Japanese brand, and I'm thinking Toshiba, but I don't know why I'm thinking Toshiba. I can't remember, but what was cool about them is they were 8mm, so they came on these little mini rolls of actually 16mm film. You'd shoot it one way, and then they had these little daylight spools, and then you'd flip the daylight spool and run it the other way,
Oh,
and then they
wow.
would splice it down the middle to make 8mm. That's how they
That's
used to do it
crazy.
before they did the cartridges for the Super 8, right? Where you just
Right.
pop that in. So
Yeah.
yeah, you basically get a mini roll of 16 with a daylight spool with black on each side. You'd shoot one way through the camera. When it was done, you'd take that and you'd flip it and put it in again, and then it would shoot the other half of the film, and then they would splice it, and then they would send you back the inner positive or the whatever kind of film you were shooting. They would send you the print,
Yeah.
and you could project it at home on a little projector. And yeah, I still have them. They don't work anymore. I'd love to restore them, but yeah, my dad was like, I don't want these anymore. Do you want them? And I'm like, sure, I'm gonna keep these. These are cool. And
Yeah,
so
that's a
yeah.
great influence. I mean, So were you helping your dad with anything that he was doing? Did he ever take it to any kind of a level of that, people was he commercial? Was he just
Not as
business?
no, the filming part with the 8mm camera and stuff, that was just for fun. That was just his own interest. I mean, we have gobs and gobs of family videos, or sorry, family 8mm films that we would watch on a projector. No, his profession was photography. So I was around photography a lot. I even worked at a camera store with my mom that she was the manager of for a long time when I was in high school. So, I was always around photography. I grew up in the 80s when skateboarding was huge. My dad was the president of Canadian Skateboard Association. So we'd have Tony Hawk and Steve Caballero and all these guys come up. And so I'd shoot pictures of them skateboarding and my regular friends. And so that's kind of how I got into photography. And then in high school, I took a videography class, which I think it was high 8 or something. I can't remember. Maybe it was even, yeah, it's probably high 8. And I took that class and I thought, oh, this is even cooler than photography. I think the moving picture idea is even more interesting. So that's when I sort of got it in my brain that I wanted to be a cinematographer. It was in high school that I really wanted to be a cameraman and shoot in movies,
Yeah,
So that was a big
that's
part of it.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So so Tony Hawk, holy cow. So did you find yourself going after like action sports photography at all, or did you find like it was more of a narrative interest for you?
Well, at that time, when I first got in photography, because I worked at the camera store, my parents would give me a film, 36 images, because it would come in like 12, 24, and 36. That's what the rolls were. So they would give me one roll a week free, and I could develop it for free. And so I would shoot, in high school, you'd shoot your friends and skateboarding. So I was kind of more driven by shooting skateboarding because I had an in, I was allowed to go and shoot high-end skateboarders who were there for competitions and stuff. So definitely I was probably pushing in the direction of action at the beginning. But then once I got interest into video shooting, then it sort of transitioned into more narrative stuff, telling short stories with dialogue and with actors. But it definitely started out as action at the beginning for sure. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what were some of your first short films you did? Were they, was it something that you had to be like your own crew, like kind of it is with
Oh
film
yeah.
school, like?
Yeah. Well, so there's the Vancouver Film School now in Vancouver, which is very big. At the time, I took like a weekend class there. And then there was a college there called Capilano College, and they had a couple classes you could take. So that's when I first really started shooting film. 8mm was when I was taking a couple film classes. And so they would give you assignments. So yeah, like a lot of times the crew would be like, a couple actors, me, and maybe like one other person helping me out with like a little bit of lighting or carrying some equipment or helping me load the cameras or whatever. So it was always like 3 or 4 people. I mean, it was like, super low budge. And at that time, actually, when you were shooting on 8mm, the camera didn't have any sound. So these were silent movies. So I started out just shooting silent narratives where all the action told the story, like my first film was, I can't remember. It was about a guy who was sneaking into someone's apartment. He was going to rob him, and the guy came home and didn't realize the guy was there. And then he snuck up behind him like he was going to kill him. And then the guy was like looking at his mail, and then his mail, it said, "We don't have any more money for this film, so that's the end of the movie." So that you don't know if the guy gets killed or not. It
Very
was
clever.
something dumb like that, but that kind of stuff. I was trying to be clever inside the box that I had. So a lot of visual stories at first.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I imagine that helped you out quite a bit, because I think everybody starts off shooting just MOS, or
Yeah.
without sound, for people that don't might be watching this that don't understand the technical terms of the movie industry. But
Right.
I think that those narratives and that storytelling really makes people better filmmakers, because if you can't explain something with dialogue and talking, it forces you into being able to like tell a story with a single image or a
Yeah.
shot. And I think that makes everybody a better filmmaker. So
For
from
sure.
when did sound actually come into play for you?
Gosh, well, obviously, like I said before, like I took a video class in high school. So those cameras, the video cameras had sound. But when I took the 8mm film class at the college, it was a non-sound class, of course. But, and I'm just trying to think like some of the first things I ever shot. I remember shooting a short film with my cousins when we were all at the cabin for a reunion. We did a Indiana Jones in the Golden Horseshoe, and we found this old decrepit building, and we just kind of reenacted scenes, from Raiders, and kind of with what resources we had, like, for example, like we had a risk board at the cabin. So we made a little paper airplane, a little red string, and we made it like that map in Raiders of the Lost Ark when it like goes across the map when he's flying. So we were like making it like fly across the map. We didn't even have, this is the sad part, we didn't even have the soundtrack for Raiders of the Lost Ark with us. This camera that I had the ability to plug in like a Walkman and so you could like mix like half the audio from the microphone and then half from the Walkman. And so we didn't have Raiders of the Lost Ark music to play. All we had for some really weird reason was my aunt had a copy of Man from Snowy River, right?
Built-in soundtrack.
So we tried to find the best, like most epic action sequence sounds of that, and we played that. Oh, and then we also had Princess Bride for some reason. And so I found random cues. And so when the action started, I had to push like play to like cue the music. And then I had to time it just long enough to like stop it. So it sounded like the music went with the movie. It was very, very much like on the fly, but
it's great.
Yeah. And he was out looking for a golden horseshoe. So, yeah, that kind of stuff. So that was kind of like my early entry into like narrative that actually had audio.
Yeah.
And then after that, and then you mentioned the student Emmy. Then I went to film school, and in film school, I wanted to be a DP, and I just shot a ton of stuff on 16 millimeter, like a ton, and some on video too, but mostly 16 millimeter. And it was towards the end of school that I had an idea for a short film that I thought would make a great story, but I knew that if I was going to do it, I'd have to finance it. And if I was going to finance it and be the DP, I was going to like basically be financing somebody else's movie. So I thought, well, wait a second, maybe I could direct and shoot it. So that's the idea for the film called The Last Good War, which is a World War II movie that I did. And it won the student Emmy that you mentioned before. So yeah, so that's kind of where I went from being a DP into being like, hey, maybe this directing thing is something I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Kind of
Did you find yourself when you were at that age? Who were some of your early influences? What were some of the guys that you were watching? And like, obviously, you mentioned Raiders of the Lost Ark. Who could not be
so
inspired by
Spielberg
that
is a
movie?
huge one. Yeah, so Raiders and Jaws were huge for me. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner was a huge one for me because the lighting was so amazing. Alien was great too by Ridley Scott. That was a big one. Kind of, as I was getting towards the end of film school, people like Soderbergh were starting to come out, and he was shooting and directing some of his own earlier films. And also Doug Liman, he did Swingers, and he shot and directed that. And so I was really inspired by that because the idea was, oh, here's a guy who's a DP and also a director, I'm curious real quick. When did you first get interested in shooting? I can't remember. You told me before.
It actually happened. I was at Conrad Hall's memorial service in Brentwood, and
okay.
I got stuck it was at the Brentwood Playhouse, and I arrived late because I just literally moved to Los Angeles from Chicago, and I didn't really know my way around very well. And so I ended up at the bottom of the auditorium. I talked them into letting me in because they said we're at maximum capacity and there's a fire hazard. I go, look, man, I just got here. I'm from Chicago. And I was all right, come on in, which I wasn't lying. I just
from
literally
Chicago,
landed. Yeah. And I remember sitting in the stairwell and I couldn't even get into the auditorium.
Yeah.
And I was so frustrated. I was sitting on these stairs and I was just, oh man, I can't believe I came all this way and I can't even get in. And Warren Beatty came in and was like standing right next to me. And, we're in the same, this little stairwell that goes up into the auditorium. And after a while, he just like sat on the stairs. And I remember just saying to myself, well, if Warren Beatty is okay with this and sitting down and just chilling out and being here, then I need to take a chill pill here. But I remember in that moment listening to Steve Zalian talking about working with Conrad Hall on searching for Bobby Fischer, and he was mentioning a scene that Conrad had spent 3 hours lighting this auditorium where this final chess showdown is supposed to happen with these kids, and all of a sudden Steve got this idea, like, and he said, instead of showing this beautiful auditorium doing this, this shot of the master shot, if you will, he said, I thought it might be more interesting if we just did a slow push in on the doorway, the closed doors into the auditorium, and we just heard the activity going on in the background. And Conrad Hall's response was, you know what? Now you're thinking like a filmmaker. He goes, give me 5 minutes and I'll be ready. And Conrad just literally put a slash of light across this door. And in hearing that story, I started thinking about lighting. I started actually thinking about my own creative juices. And I realized at that moment that I had that same passion for lighting that sort of Conrad, and that sort of mindset. I'm not comparing myself to Conrad Hall at all. Trust me, that's the furthest thing from this what I'm trying to say here. But I just felt like I have that inside of me, and I just didn't realize it until that moment. And so I walked out of the Brentwood Playhouse. It took me 45 minutes to find my car that was a block and a half away. My head was in the clouds that much. So huge influence, you know how important
Yeah.
those influences are. So I totally get the whole Jaws and the Raiders thing.
Yeah. When you see those things that inspire you, they just get, like you said, your creative juices just start flowing, and all of a sudden all these ideas start flooding, and all of a sudden you wish you could write them all down, but they're coming too quickly, all that. But it's a
Yeah,
good problem to have, but for sure. It's not a bad
sure.
problem.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I remember meeting Conrad Hall when they were shooting Road to Perdition. We stopped by the set and I got introduced to Conrad. I think Scotty Sakamoto was operating on that show, and I did the movie The Babe with him. And so I knew Scott, and I went up and said hello to him, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Conrad Hall. Like, could you introduce me? This was
Yeah.
before he even had, obviously prior to his memorial service. And I remember shaking his hand. I was like, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. And sort of that was just a quick hello, and that was it. And I
Yeah.
remember after his memorial service, I watched the DVD behind the scenes for Road to Perdition, and they showed shots of him. And I'd already started shooting at that point. I think I'd shot my first movie, and I remember just getting so emotional and just like welled up, thinking, like, here's this man who has no idea that he completely inspired me to be a cinematographer, and he's had such a huge influence on me, and I'll
Yeah.
never get a chance to thank him. And I just literally started like just getting like choked up with tears, but it was pretty special.
That's very cool. Well, Road to Perdition is a great movie too, especially when you mentioned how much you love lighting. I mean, that movie is all about lighting. I mean,
Yeah,
that's really good film noir lighting. I mean, it's beautiful. One of my
yeah,
favorites. Road to
yeah.
Perdition is awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's switch gears a little bit. I'd love
Yeah.
to talk to you about, like, so you got the Emmy, right? And
Yeah. I got the
then
student Emmy.
where
Yeah.
did that go from there? Like, where did you find yourself like going in a professional direction or
Yeah.
pursuing that next step?
So just talking just a little bit more about this World War II short film that I did
Hmm.
that got the student Emmy. What was cool about it is I had got a bunch of grants to pay for it. So I actually, of my own money, I think I spent $1,000 on it. And with all the different festivals I went to, I think I won about $8,000. So my student short film actually made me money, which was crazy. And in addition to getting the student Emmy, which is almost even a little bit more special, was I went to the Heartland Film Festival, and I was the recipient of the Jimmy Stewart Crystal Heart Memorial Award, which his daughter Judy um, Stewart gave to me. So that was really special because that was an award that the Stewart family, gives out once every year at this festival to someone. So they had given me that award. So that was really
Wow.
special too. Yeah. But that film, what happened next really, in a very short version, basically I think I was working as a camera assistant on some commercial work or something. And there was another uh, PA there that I was working with. And I told him that I was interested in making a feature, directing a World War II feature. And he says, well, I'm interested in producing movies. And I showed him my short film. And he says, I think I know some very rich people that will give us money to make a feature version. And I'm like, okay,
That
sounds
happens every
good.
day here.
Yeah. This has never repeated itself, by the way, on any other movie that I financed. But on this one, it did. But basically went and we sat down with them. And these people were billionaires. I mean, they were like very, very wealthy people, and he was friends with their oldest son. And anyway, showed them the short video and the film, and they said, wow, that's really impressive. You know, we told them about the accolades and how it basically cost a couple $1,000s to make, and they were blown away. And then we kind of pitched them on my feature version of it, and they said, okay, well, how about if we give you like $900,000 to go make that? Is that cool? And we were like, yeah, that's cool.
After you pick yourself up off the floor.
Yeah, we try to stay very calm. And then, you know, within the next year, we made the movie, and it was called Saints and Soldiers, which I think someone recently said they just saw it streaming. There's 3 in the series, but I think the first one you can see it on Hulu or Amazon Prime or Netflix right now. They cycle. I don't know when they pop up, but they pop up sometimes, and people say, "Hey, your movie's on Netflix again." So, but what
And
was
that was
cool?
2012, it looks like, from your IMDb.
No, that actually would be 2003
Oh,
or
okay. Yeah, I see it. I'm
2004.
sorry. I
Yeah,
just
there's
wrote
three.
wrong.
There's 3 Saints and Soldiers. There's
Got it.
Saints and Soldiers, Saints and Soldiers Airborne Creed, and Saints and Soldiers The Void. And yes, I think you're looking at Airborne Creed.
I'm
That was
looking at your franchise here
2012.
on IMDb. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, a lot of foreign countries got really interested in them, so we kept on making them. But the last thing I was going to say about Saints and Soldiers, which was really cool, is a fun story, is so we made the movie, and because I had, you know, been at a few festivals with my short and had experiences of entering festivals and getting into some and not getting into others, my producing partner said, okay, well, our movie's done now, like, how many festivals should we enter? And I said, well, you know, you probably get into like, I don't know, we'll probably get into a few, you know, I don't know, let's enter like 16 of them, and then just, you know, we'll get into a couple probably. Let's just try that. So we entered 16 festivals. We got into 16 festivals, and we won 16 festivals.
This is like one of these. Is this guy for real? Like, you got a billionaire to finance his first project. He wins
I
16 film festivals.
know, it's
This is like
crazy.
a fairy princess story.
Now it all goes downhill slowly from
Yeah.
there.
And
It
then the
was
writer strike hit, and we all went under.
yeah, but that's the kind of a cool thing about that movie. So at that point, now I'm ingrained with my mindset of being a director, but also shooting my own films, or at least at this budget level, you know. So that's kind of where I was at the beginning, and that would be like 2000. Yeah, I think 2003. About 2003 is when that movie comes out. So that's when I'm fully engaged as a director. I'm now taking some meetings in Los Angeles. I now have a manager and an agent. You know, all that's kind of been put into play because of the awareness of Saints and Soldiers. Yeah.
Right. No, that's great. That's great stuff. So,
Yeah.
so as far as you shooting and directing, did you find that that was driven mostly by a budget concern, or did you find there was an efficiency to shooting and directing, or did you just
Yeah.
love both of them, that you just wanted to do both of them?
I think it's a little bit of all of those things you just said. First and foremost, because I came from a technical mindset of being a photographer and then a cinematographer, it just came natural to me that I always wanted to, like, that was my security blanket. That was the thing I was most comfortable with. And as a director, I was comfortable also controlling those elements. So just instinctively, it felt good. Second of all, I move faster when I don't have to have a conversation with a DP, because I can just put the camera there and I don't have to discuss why I want to put a camera somewhere, or I don't have to discuss where the lighting's going to look good. I just do it. So there's an efficiency on an independent film when you only got, 15 days to shoot. You move faster. So there's that. Budgetary reasons. Yes, of course, if you don't have a lot of money, you can do the 2 jobs for the price of one, which helps to put more money for props, or more money for actors, or more money for just really good lunch and craft service to make sure the crew's happy, or whatever you think that money should go to. So yeah, that's a part of it too.
Sure. Now, did you have your own equipment at this point? Because I know you own gear.
No, at that point I didn't, because at that point we were shooting film, and film, as you know, film in itself was expensive. You'd either be shooting on short ends, or if you could afford good film, you'd hope to get a good deal on it. And, you would be very careful with your film. You wouldn't roll on and do like 20 takes on one roll of film. You discuss it, shoot it, and turn the camera off immediately.
Right.
So back then I was shooting, my first film, Saints and Soldiers, was shot on a Movie Cam SL. And the reason I picked the Movie Cam SL, and it it had 400-foot loads, and it was technically a camera that was used for Steadicam use because it was so light. It was made out of plastic, basically. But I used that with a set of what did I use? The Cooks. They were Cook. Would there be S4s back then in 2003? They were Cook somethings. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's
Maybe.
the memory. I think the S4s were around because I remember doing
I
a
feel like it was
movie in
S4s.
Utah with the movie cam SL, and we had, I think the Cook S4s. I think Roger Deakins was probably one of the first guys to get his hands on
Right.
those.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, you're probably right because Roger Deakins was the representative, the poster boy for Otto Nemens, and there's an Otto Nemens in Utah where we shot it. So that's probably true. I remember I shot that movie on a movie cam SL with a set of prime lenses, which were Cooks, and I had really good. I had a really good hand grips, airy hand grips, and pretty much shot almost the whole movie handheld. And I loved it because that camera only weighed, with all that on it, maybe like 15 pounds. So that was my first camera. That was kind of that. But so we were renting gear at that point. And then as I went on to shoot and DP other films for other people, we would use like the I'm starting to forget, my Arri BL3s, right?
yeah, the
And
tank.
the tank. I've even got a shot of me hand holding. I'm not joking, you dude. I have a shot of me hand holding a shot. And my AC was Jared Hass, who directed Napoleon Dynamite. And there's a picture of me and him, and I'm hand holding a BL3 or BL4 with 1,000-foot load mag and a zoom lens on it for one shot. It must have weighed like 60 pounds. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah, it's
It was
crazy.
insane. It was insane. But yeah, so I went through a whole slew of different cameras. I never got to shoot on Panavision. Almost always was Arri. Almost always. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Panavision was. I mean, I'm a Panavision alumni because I worked on a rental house, and that was
yeah.
like when you're in film school and you got a chance to see a Panavision camera. It's like showing
Oh,
a
yeah.
16-year-old a Ferrari for the first time. You're like, oh my god, look at that.
Yeah. I got to
So
camera assist on a couple of shows in Vancouver as a camera assistant, and we used Panavision, but I never myself was the DP of anything on Panavision. It was always Arri or something like that. So
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So now you own some gear that
I
we
do
were talking
now.
about
Yeah.
that,
I do
and some
now.
lighting, and does that, you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about your commercial transition from like your,
Yeah.
so your film, you
Yeah.
did that film, and then like you started doing some episodic television after that. How did that all fall in?
Yeah, so a couple of things happened. After I did Saints and Soldiers, I then directed a few other films. I did a rugby film called Forever Strong. I did a movie called Age of Dragons for Sci-Fi Channel. I did a movie for ABC Family called Everything You Want, which was a romantic comedy. So I was directing a lot of different projects. I did a movie called Outlaw Trail, which was a kids action adventure western. Um, and as that time went on, we started making the transition from film into digital, and I started shooting on the Red One and things like that. We were still renting at that time, but then as we kind of got into, gosh, I'm trying to remember how long it's been now since I started to really own my own gear. Probably about 2012, I started getting into some more commercial work, some music videos, and we started realizing that for those smaller jobs, it was more cost effective to own the gear. So we started buying cameras, small stuff, buying a basic lighting kit, all that. Now I own a 3-ton grip electric package. I have a Chapman Pee Wee Dolly. Chapman Pee Wee Dolly, Pee Wee 3. We've got drones. I've got an Arri Alexa package with ultra primes, not master primes, just one step down. Ultra primes, Arri ultra primes. Bunch of Fujinon zoom lenses, a bunch of O'Connor heads, sticks, all that. So we have all that stuff now.
So you
And
straight
so
up production company.
yeah, for the most part, we can. I mean, I can definitely shoot, I say that our package is perfect for any kind of independent film, probably, under $1 million. Because once you start getting above $1 million, you're probably going to get into some pretty big lights. And I don't have any huge lights, obviously, or, anything that would require put it on a crane or anything like that. But definitely if you're doing independent film, yeah, we're way covered on all that stuff, with LED lights and everything that you'd want. So it's nice to
Sure.
have your own gear. It's
No,
nice
it
to have
is.
your own gear.
It's definitely a benefit to the producer, and just you know where everything's at. You know what you have,
Yep.
and so you're not going to like shoot yourself into a corner because you know what's on your truck,
Yeah.
and all that. It's definitely an efficiency. So do you have a regular crew that you're working with, and how did you go about finding your
Yeah.
collaborators?
Well, at the beginning, I mean, I worked in Vancouver as a camera assistant, and I got, into that whole film industry there, but I wasn't shooting in Vancouver. But when I moved to Utah and kind of got into that film community, which is an amazing film community. If you've never shot in Utah, well, you just said you have. It's a great, great base. They shoot lots of great stuff there. Disney shoots a ton of stuff there. Kevin Costner's show, Yellowstone, is shot there. Like tons and tons of stuff's been shot in Utah. I mean, the crews are really good. So I started working there as a camera assistant and then started shooting. So yeah, like my crew base is basically just people that I worked with many, many times on many, many films, either as a DP or as a director or a camera assistant. So I just built up that community.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever possible, I try to work with the same people if I'm filming there. For the work that I've done here in Los Angeles or traveling, it just depends on who we have to hire local when we get there and who we can bring with us. Sometimes you bring a sound guy and a camera assistant. Sometimes you don't bring anybody. It just depends on the budget. So sometimes the traveling stuff, you meet the crew when you get there,
Yeah.
You can't always bring everybody with you. So
Sure. No, it's true. Now what are your thoughts on the way production is going these days with these kind of one-man bands? Do you find that companies are wanting to hire you over other people because of the efficiency of that you own your own equipment and that you have your own set crew? Is it just an efficiency factor? Because I've personally experienced, I just got called to go shoot a show for a guy up in Oregon, and the director called me. He goes, "I'd love to work with you," because but you don't own a red camera. And so like I'm getting passed because I don't have the camera that they think that they need
yeah,
to shoot on. It's like telling a DP that he can't shoot something because he doesn't own a camera
yeah,
is it's a frustrating thing to hear. It's a very real thing, but
yeah.
I'm sure you get jobs over other guys that don't have equipment like I do, for sure.
I think it's definitely depends on the producer, the people, the client you're interacting with. Some clients, their mindsets are like fixed on weird things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, like sometimes the clients, are like, their first question, they don't even care if they've seen your reel. Their first question is, well, what camera do you own? What lenses do you use? And I'm like, they're like programmed to think like they're going to get a good commercial if it's shot on this camera with these lenses. It's like,
Right.
dude,
It's assuming that the
listen,
equipment is going to do the job and that you're just along for the ride. They don't care
yeah,
about you as an artist.
yeah, they need to be reprogrammed, because a better thing to do is to look at someone's reel, especially a DP's reel, and say, how are they at lighting? How are they at composition? How are they at camera moves? Because I guarantee you can give an amateur a really high-end camera with really nice lenses and bring in Roger Deakins and give him a Sony A7S with a cheap 50 millimeter plastic lens. And guess what? He'll blow you out of the water with, a piece of equipment that's way cheaper. So it's wrong to think that camera equipment is the first thing to ask. I'm talking
Yeah.
about clients asking that. The minute I hear that, it sets off a red flag for me. It tells me these people don't know really what they're doing.
Right. Or
But
they're
to be,
maybe not interested in you as an artist, but they're just more concerned with like the gear, and they don't really understand that, which is,
yeah,
sort of like one of the last questions I wanted to ask you here, just to kind of, to start wrapping up. So what would you say if you described your craft, your artistry? Do you have a certain style that you find that you fall into, or what drives you as an artist, as a creative person?
yeah. So, well, my creative process is, when I'm looking for something, I want to be driven by it passionately. I want to be doing something that, one is something that I would love to see if I was just an observer, an audience member. Two, am I going to have fun while I'm making it? That drives me a lot. Part of my creative process is to make sure it's something that I want to do, and the people that I'm working with are also excited about collaborating and working together. Because if I know those elements are all part of it, I know that the output of what we make is going to be something that everyone's going to be happy with, and I'm going to have a good memory or good experience with. So that's a big part of the creative process for me. I don't really think about budget or how much it costs. I really think about, am I going to enjoy this experience? Am I going to learn something from this? Like, for example, I did a movie in France about Joan of Arc, and I loved it. I loved it because not only was I getting paid to basically do my job, but I was learning about Joan of Arc and how great and important of a historical figure she was. So that was a really great project to work on. So I like things like that. That drives me.
That's awesome. Well, you've certainly had, I would say, not the normal career path as far as being able to sort of land in these really great opportunities where you're winning student awards and having billionaires finance your first project. So if someone were, starting today from
Yeah.
scratch, someone's watching this podcast and go, I really kind of connected with what that guy said about directing and wanted to shoot, and I'd like to be a filmmaker. What advice would you have for, someone that's coming into our industry right now?
Yeah. Well, a few things. One, don't get all wrapped up in gear. You know, be educated, know about it, learn about it. But whatever you can afford, that's the thing you should shoot on. And you shouldn't say, well, I'll shoot when I get this camera or whatever. Whatever you have, go shoot on it, practice. Framing and lighting doesn't cost anything. You can find pretty lighting, natural lighting. Go and shoot something, learn about that. Learn about storytelling. Make all your mistakes early on so that you don't have to make as many later on. So just get out and practice. That's important. People always are like, well, I'll do it when I get this done or when I get this done. No, just go make anything. Just do that. Two, if you can, find a mentor. And even if you can't, even if you can't interact with that mentor, hopefully you can. Hopefully you can find someone through social media who can give you advice and tips and feedback on your work. That's great. If you can get that, that's really helpful. But say your mentor is Ron Howard. Watch all of his films, read every article about him, listen to every interview, study that person, and figure out what it is that you admire about that person as a mentor, So do that. And then the third component of it is paying your dues. And what I mean by that is go out and volunteer. Go volunteer on film shoots. Even if you want to be a director someday and someone wants you to come and help for free to be the boom op, go do it. Nothing is more important than being on set. No book can teach you all that stuff you can learn by being on set. You can learn so much by just observing and being on set. So go and do some free labor on a movie. And guess what? All of a sudden you'll have that ability, that knowledge, that common sense and etiquette of set that guess what? The next time they're going to hire you. Not because you went to film school, not because of this real, not whatever, but because they've met you and interacted with you. They trust you as a person. Because this industry, when they say networking, it's all about friends hiring friends. It really is. And you need to make friends, genuine friends. And you want to make friends with people on set, you need to go and volunteer. That's how you make their friends. So go pay your dues. Work for free for a little bit. Doesn't take too long. Just go do it. So there you go. Those are my tips.
That's great. So Ryan Little, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks everybody for tuning in to this podcast. We've been having a conversation with Ryan, who is a director and cameraman and very accomplished. You can follow his links that I'll post at the end of the video here. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Ryan.